And being able to be actively passive means I'm actively looking for passive investment opportunities that will help me continue that time freedom.
Welcome to the American Dream Builder and Investor podcast, where our vision is to inspire busy professionals, especially first and second generation immigrants and Americans, to explore the state of the American dream in 2022 and beyond. That is the trinity of freedom: time, geography, and financial freedom.
Awesome. Welcome back to the American Dream Builder and Investor podcast. We're having another episode with awesome guest, Aaron Wong, who's a active passive investor and has had over a decade of experiences. I do want to give you his formal intro just because I feel like he really summarizes his experience so well. He's been utilizing over a decade of investing and entrepreneurial experiences in his freedom journey. He has developed a strong track record of success, utilizing both of the experiences mentioned. For example, within the first few years out of college, he actually racked up a little bit over $100,000 in debt with student loans, business loans, car loans. And then while he was focused on paying off the debt, he actually accomplished that goal of paying off the debt within 2 years through a detailed financial plan. We can dive into that a little bit as well. And when they decided to focus on reaching their financial independence, then meaning he and his family, they actually accomplished this in another 2 years, utilizing a financial independence plan developed through trial and error. So we can see that Aaron is a man of planning and execution. Aaron graduated from the University of Utah with a dual bachelor's degree in Chinese and Asian studies, along with a master's of business administration. He also has a master's degree in management with additional certificates in change management, organizational leadership, and project management from Colorado Technical University. So in his spare time, he also enjoys spending time with his family, playing sports, and scuba diving. So very competent individual that we have here, and super experienced passive investor, also has an active investing experience as well. Aaron, before we dive into some of the questions that I thought of for you, is there anything in your bio that we might have missed that you'd like to cover?
No, it's just I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think really with my bio, something I really try to focus on now is really on the passive investing and personal finance side, helping other people also pursue this journey of financial independence, because I think it is doable for everyone with a little planning, right? Exactly what you said.
Yeah, with a little planning. It's interesting. Our podcast is more focused on helping first and second generation immigrants and Americans, but there's also people that are not that, but they also get so inspired from the stories, because a lot of times, like, well, if people can come from another country and achieve that, and they can do that too. So I love the fact that you do have a heritage with your family originally from China, but I believe you're a second generation immigrant, right?
That's correct.
I think you mentioned. So you have had a lot of success that your family maybe helped you pave as well. But to me, when I read your bio, like, you've done a lot of the stuff yourself. So maybe walk us through kind of some of the definitions on your website. When I read your website, you talked about active passive investing. What is that? And then we'll maybe dive into a few pieces of your journey so far.
Sure. So actively passive is kind of a unique term. Basically, it's looking for passive investments and being almost like full-time, always looking at deals, trying to find the right passive investment deals to get into so that you can continue your journey to financial independence. I know you talk a lot about freedom, different types of freedom, and I'm very big on that, and just having that time freedom. And being able to be actively passive means I'm actively looking for passive investment opportunities that will help me continue that time freedom.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. You also done a lot of different things, and you also have done active investment, and there's different stages of life. We talked about this before. I mean, passive investing, even though there's a lot of buzzwords around this topic, but at the end of the day, it's just a tool. So can you talk us through, like, what's your journey in terms of investing in general, how you went from active and then to passive, and how you try to juggle both, and what that's done for you and your family a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off the FIRE community, this financial independence, retire early. I got into that probably about 2008-ish, so right around the last crash, the big crash that we went through. And so I was really into that, and still I am. So that really preaches a lot about stocks and investing in stocks. So I've always been interested in stock investing or just investing in general. And so during that time, I was pretty active buying stocks and all of that and in mutual funds and all that. But it wasn't until about 2013 was when I bought my first home that I now consider more like a live and flip. We lived in it for about 3 years, did a lot of rehab to it, rented it out after we moved, eventually sold it in about 2019. And this was 2013, 2019. We sold it, made pretty well off of that investment. And then from there, it was just like, hey, do we want to keep going in stocks or should we look at some other things? And it was right around that. At that time, I started looking. My wife has always been into like real estate. I got to credit her. She's basically the one that's really pushed everything with investments. And so I wish I would have listened to her earlier, but she was always pushing, hey, look into real estate at that time. Because, fire communities always talking about stocks. And I was like, whatever. But then I started listening to a lot of podcasts and they kept mentioning bigger pockets and real estate. And so I started doing some research around that time. And just for some reason, it just clicked in my mind that I got to get into real estate. And so Brandon Turner really talked a lot about, at that time was talking about multifamily. And so I was like, okay, I got to do small multifamily. So that was our plan. And so we started buying small multifamilies. And so within about a month, we bought 2 quads, 2 fourplexes and 2 duplexes, and closed on another quad a few months later. And so we were just all into that. And so, but then from after that, this was now COVID, 2020-ish, I went back to Utah where I grew up. I was meeting with a friend of mine I hadn't seen in quite a few years, and we're just talking about what we're up to, tell him about, I was getting into real estate and getting all this cash flow from this, and it's great. And he then is like, hey, I really want to get into this. So eventually we partnered up and we started small multifamily, continued on the small multifamily, and then got into some of the bigger stuff, syndications and stuff. And then we closed on a couple syndications through our journey and partnered on a few other syndications on the active side. So that's kind of the active side of my investing career.
This podcast is sponsored by Life Mission Capital, founded by me, Missy Liu, where my life mission is to help busy professionals invest well so they can focus on what matters. All my life, I was taught to study and work hard for my freedom. Until one day, I realized that unless I let my money work hard for me, I will always be trading my most precious resource, time, for freedom. Since then, we have also been helping our investors passively diversify into more than 1,000 units of recession and inflation-resistant alternative investments, such as multifamily, mobile home parks, short-term rentals, and more. Learn more with our free ebooks at lifemissioncapital.com.
Yeah. And in case the audience doesn't know, some of the golden nuggets you already dropped is a great podcast, Bigger Pockets. A lot of people got started from listening to the podcast, and the host, Brandon Turner, was a great resource for many people. And then syndications, essentially, at first you were doing your own deals on the quadplexes, wanted to do bigger deals. The only thing that's stopping you is essentially the funds. So how do we get funds? We can get it using other people's money, but we also want to make sure we're dealing with the right partners, the right opportunities, also giving investors good returns. So that's where we're pulling investors' funds together to group purchase. So just for listeners who may not know about this. So that's your active journey. And a lot of people get started to go passive at some point. And some people, they just start with passive investing. I just feel like it depends on where they have success with. Some people, they may be lawyers, doctors, or executives. They already have a success with what they're doing. And they're so close to just already have their time freedom as long as they put their money into good investments that's working for them without them being there. So what was the transition from active to passive?
I've always been a passive investor at heart, even though when we got into those small multifamilies, I thought it was going to help us be passive. When you invest in real estate, especially like that, like rental properties, it's not a passive job. I mean, even though you have a property manager that's dealing with a lot of the issues for you, you're still actively in that, doing a lot, making a lot of decisions, managing the manager. And so I've always been a passive investor at heart. And so it's just really just always just looking for passive investment opportunities. And so even though I went active, I immediately was looking for passive investment opportunities, just trying to find better ways to utilize my money. Like a lot of these successful investors say, your money should always be working for you. So yeah. I've always been looking for opportunities to kind of find different ways to have my money to work for me at all times. And so
that makes sense. So one thing that you mentioned, I know a lot of people didn't realize, I certainly didn't realize, And when you talk about owning quadplexes, etc., like people, because when I say passive investing, everyone has different interpretations. They'll say, yeah, I have some passive investments that have quadplex, eightplex that I have. So talk us through, like, why wasn't it passive for you? Like, what was the amount of work involved for you to complete the investment, finding the opportunities and managing everything, even though managing the manager? So talking about your active investing experience and going to passive, well, one thing I want to dive a little bit deeper into is some people who are looking to take the first step or wanting to invest in real estate, but they don't have the time. What they don't realize is active, it can be really time consuming, especially if you're trying to optimize the investment. So for example, you talk about managing the managers, right? Some people think I'm just going to find a property, I'm just going to park with the property manager and that's it. Can you walk us through some of the scenarios where you felt like the active investment was too much, taking up too much of my time? I thought it was going to be a lot less work. I would love to hear some of those stories.
Yeah, I mean, any property you own is going to take up a lot of time. But I think some of the first investments that we went into with our small multifamilies, like I said, we bought 2 fourplexes and 2 duplexes. And 1 fourplex and 2 of the duplexes were all in the same city. We had the same property manager. It was a referral, because I thought I was trying to do the right thing by getting a referral. And at first, we flew out there and looked at the properties, met the property manager. At first, everything seemed really good. They were saying the right things, but I didn't start seeing results. Then you kind of have to start getting involved and just really following up on that manager and just figuring out, hey, what is going on? Tell us what's going on with the properties. And at that time, there was also COVID that came in, and then they kept using COVID. I can't go to these properties. I can't rehab this and that. And then eventually I had to start looking at it for another property manager. I got a referral from another syndicator actually for some of these properties. I reached out to their property manager and they immediately took over. And you could see it was like a 9-day difference on our properties. I still have to manage this manager a little bit, but not as much. They at least communicate a little bit better. And so it's just taking that time and just realize they always talk about, and this is the reason why when the personal finance, financial independence community, you also hear a lot of people say, don't go into real estate. You want to be passive, right? It's because it is a full-time job unless, right, as you know, you go into syndications, passive investments, definitely possible, but you just have to pick the right investments.
Yeah, definitely. I think small things like that, even working with a property manager, right? Like, are they doing rehab correctly? Or because it's a fun balance between having too many layers of reporting and also cutting to a profit. But if you just, especially in today's interest rate climate, right now we're talking in October 2022, if you just fund the property and without doing value add, which is mostly rehabs, making it run more efficiently, then the cash flow is so low, then you're taking other risks and all that may have negative cash flow even. So it may not make sense. So I understand what you're saying, to optimize, to actually have a good investment. I know people who they call themselves slumlord, and I'm like, why would you do that? But he's like, I don't have to manage anything, but I feel to do it right as an active investor, it does take a lot of time. You could just be like hands off and not worry about it. But yeah, definitely. So appreciate you sharing your stories on that. Now, I love to dive more into your journey from the debt, $100,000 in debt, to getting out of the debt, and even more on that to the financial independence. Like, approximately, what's the percentage that came from what type of investments? How did you really plan out? Like, what made it so successful in this process?
So when we had $100,000 in debt, at that time, I had my business, racking up all this debt and my schooling. And so we eventually had to make a decision that we needed to start paying this down. And so at that time, my wife was working. She was basically supporting us because my business wasn't bringing in anything. So I basically had to close up shop at that time of that business, even though I enjoyed it. But it just wasn't bringing in anything. So I had to go back to a job that I had previously. I had to start, we had to find another job. And we ended up selling a lot of stuff that we had. Like at the time, we had a townhome that we owned. We ended up selling that, moving back in with my parents. We sold, and then I got a car. I got a new job. Like I was looking for a new job that moved us actually out to San Francisco. And that job provided a signing bonus for us. And so as we left, We sold one of our 2 cars. Again, just finding ways to be able to pay down that debt and just optimizing our budget, optimizing our life was really important for us. And really putting our really specific budget and trying to live by a budget and trying to cut down on a budget. And with the way we were living, we just want to make sure that we were saving enough money every single month to be able to pay down debt. And so it's just really having that focus and knowing that you're going to have to sacrifice certain things in order to pay down that debt. But you don't have to sacrifice everything, right? But you needed to sacrifice the needs and wants and just know that this is a short-term solution. It's just a short term that you're going to go through this to be able to pay down your debt. And once your debt's paid down, then you can start focusing on building it back up again. So that was really the focus during those 2 years, was just let's as minimal as we can so that we can pay down this debt as quickly as we can, sell whatever we could sell that could bring back, that help pay down the debt. And so basically in 2 years, we were able to get that all paid down.
That's awesome. And it's interesting that you sold a townhome to get rid of the debt, and then you purchased more real estate and got in more debt to grow to financial independence. Well, for some people, it may feel counterintuitive, but that can be good if you leverage it correctly. So walk us through how you get to the financial independence and financial freedom piece with your investments.
Yeah, so we paid off our debt. We want to start focus on financial independence, just kind of figuring out what we want to do with our lives. And at that time, we had about 15 years. We calculated it would take us about 15 years to be able to be financially independent. And so, this is based upon, maxing out of all of our retirement accounts and putting money towards that stocks and saving in that way. Because, at that time, we're still really focused in on the FIRE community. And then when I started buying real estate, we started making those calculations, say, hey, this is what we would need to be able to get at it, to be able to reach financial independence. And then how we really figured out what to really get those, took us 2 years to reach financial independence, was we sat down and we figured out, okay, well, what does financial independence really look like to us? Because I think there's a lot of people and a lot of, financial experts out there that when they talk about financial independence, they always talk about, hey, take a percentage of your income and multiply it by 10, right? So you make $100,000, you need to save $1 million, whatever it is. But that doesn't work, just because $1 million, if you take the 4% rule, that's $40,000 a year. Do you need $40,000 to retire or to be financially independent? I don't know, because you don't know what your spending is, right, when you reach financial independence. So it comes down to figuring out what your financial independence expenses are and then making a plan. It's basically creating a budget for financial independence. And then from there, you can utilize that 4% rule of figuring out, okay, if it's $4,000 spending, then a 4% rule, it's $1 million. But with real estate, as you know, with passive investing, what I like to utilize is something called an 8% rule, right? The 8% rule, basically cash on cash, you look for investments that give you right around 8%, which is obviously doable and realistic. And then you can make that calculation. So really, an 8% rule versus 4% rule, you actually only need to save half of what you need to save versus a 4% rule. So if you want $40,000 to retire, 4% rule says $1 million, but if you utilize the 8% rule, it's only $500,000, if that's what you're looking at. And so that's what really helped us propel us and to get us that number, what we needed to retire. So we figured out what our financial independence number was. And then I started looking for passive investment opportunities, because now we had some cash, we're getting stuff through investments. So I just started deploying cash as much as I could. And just finding different passive investment opportunities that hit that threshold of at least 8% of cash on cash. And so eventually, once we got enough of that going, right, that once that cash flow starts coming in, then you can consider yourself. That's basically how we hit financial independence, was through that passive investing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the fact that you recognize finding investments with consistent higher cash flow opportunities can help you get there faster. You also mentioned that in the FIRE community, a lot of people focus on stocks, mutual funds, etc. So how did you convince yourself to step into the space that it's actually going to give you the lifestyle you wanted, versus just because a lot of people are just, all they know is stock market? How did you make that educated decision? I felt like you can actually win better, faster here.
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to My wife has always been pushing me towards real estate, and I just didn't listen, right? Because I was in the fire community, and the fire community really doesn't talk a lot about real estate. And if they do, they always say, don't invest in real estate because if you want a full-time job. And so that was my mentality. But once I got into the space and started buying property, and I did some syndications, I saw how realistic it was, right? And then I invested it as a limited partner in some of these syndications and started seeing the cash flow that, hey, this actually works. This is real. And that's what changed my mentality around, was just trying different things and actually being in the space for a little bit before I actually got into the syndications. I think that's what really helped.
Yeah, I think you'll appreciate the passive aspect too. After having to do it hands-on a little more yourself, you appreciate how nice it is to be able to kind of sit back and collect distributions. So coming back, I want to ask you a little more about how you did the planning. Whatever it's $100,000 would be $1 million invested and etc. Or some people may or may not have $1 million that they can deploy to generate. How did you build up your nest egg? Because I feel like $5 is investing, 500,000 is investing, 5 million is investing. The returns are at different levels. Obviously, the bigger the number, you'll be able to get to your freedom faster. Even with real estate, typically, right? Syndication world, we typically project doubling your money in 5 years. Even some projects overperform and some may under. It depends on what you chose, and hopefully it's a good one. But even that's 5 years, how did you build up your nest egg first and then have the $50,000 or $100,000 to deploy?
So for me, I think a little bit different because I had owned some property before. That one property in 2013, it returned a pretty significant amount for us. And I was able to utilize that to actually start investing in some smaller multifamilies. And then I utilized a portion of that, but then the rest I actually had in stocks. And if you know, from 2019, 2020, 2021, stocks did really well. And that really helped me because I actually had it in stocks. And so I basically sold out a lot of my stocks at that time and just started investing in real estate. As soon as I found out or figured out that, hey, limited, being an LP in these syndications, passive investing, you can make so much great cash flow without having to lift a finger, and tax benefits and all these benefits that I can receive. That's where I really started placing my money, even though I had to pay a lot of taxes, capital gains tax, to get out of the stocks. But as you run the numbers, very much a numbers person. I ran the numbers. It made sense for me to sell and pay those taxes now because in the future, because of the projected gains I know I can probably get through real estate, it'll even itself out over a couple of years and go even further. But for people that are just looking to start, which may be what the question is I think I would say that there's many different ways to start. There's crowdfunding sites that you can start until you can get a small enough nest egg. I would say anywhere between 25 to 50. If you can get right around there, you can start investing. And you don't have to go as fast. You can just take it slow. Like you said, double your money every 5 years is fine. And as long as you get some more, just start building on top of that. I think it's fine to start slow, but it compounds as the returns start coming back. So
I think the important lesson to take away from what you said is start early. Even though in the bio we talked about how you accomplish things in 2 years, but in terms of financial independence, but you had and then get to financial freedom, there is steps you took before that to kind of prepare for that, like making that first step, purchasing your first house or making the first passive investment. The earlier that is, like purchase real estate and wait, like the faster you can get on the train, but the later you wait, the later, like
absolutely
compound less. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. And it's amazing. You didn't just do the stereotypical multifamily. You went into mobile home park investing, which is something I've been doing a lot more recently as well, because it's a recession resistant and high cash flowing. And you also got into oil and gas. Can you talk about how you used your due diligence to go across different asset classes? Because we also have some very experienced investor here, but they haven't dabbled into those industries.
Mm-hmm. Well, really just for me, it was looking at the sponsors of these deals and their experience, their track record. Like, I don't know anything about oil and gas personally. I know nothing other than when I go fill up my gas tank and how much it costs. But it's really looking at sponsors, looking at who's presenting these opportunities, and do I trust them? Do they look like a group that I can trust? And then if I trust them, then I'll look at the deal. And when you look at a deal, once you look at one, you have similar things that you're looking for with every deal. And just kind of have to ask yourself, are these realistic numbers? Are these quote unquote conservative enough numbers for you that you think that they can actually reach these? But really, it comes down to the sponsor. I think I look less at the deal, but more at the sponsor, because if I know that sponsor can perform and has performed, I trust them a lot more when they present a deal to me.
Definitely. I actually had this conversation, somewhat similar conversation with somebody else yesterday. He said there's really two questions passive investors need to consider when they're making an investment. Is this person ethical, doing the right things? Mm-hmm. Are they a good person? And the second thing is, are they competent? So kind of similar to what you said, but put in different words. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I would agree with those two.
Yeah. But how do you verify they're competent? What are the things you're looking for?
Well, a lot of it's the track record. I want to see what have they done in the past and how did it perform, right, from their past performance. And have they gone through any types of downturns? Have they even had unsuccessful or what they would say, I guess, deals or opportunities that didn't hit projections, right? I want to know, are they willing to talk about those? Do they have experience with those? What did they do? What are they doing differently now? That will help them learn, and that they learn from that they're going to be able to utilize in the investment that I'm looking at right now. So it's just looking at the track record really is what I'm looking for. And then, like you mentioned, can I trust these people? Do they seem trustworthy? Another big thing is communication. How well do they communicate with me? Like the oil and gas, they're communicating every month. Oil and gas is every week, which is, I think, a lot. But most people are like monthly, which I like monthly. Personally, I like monthly. And then some every quarter, right? And some are just kind of periodic, wherever. But I really look for the type of communication and how often do they communicate? Because that's important for me, because I really want to know what's going on with my investment. And I'll read it. If you send me an update, I'll read the investment. I'll read the updates and things like that. And another thing I look for is, now, a couple other things I'll look for. Number one is, how quickly will I start getting distributions? That's because I'm looking for cash flow, right? I'm a passive investor. I want to, if it's fine if I have to wait a year, I just need to know that that's the expectation. I'm not going to see anything for a year. Second thing I look for is the type of debt that they're utilizing. As you know, right now in October 2022, interest rates are going up and probably continue to go up for the next little while. Anyone with bridge loans, it's squeezing the net profits. So a lot of the investments that I'm passively invested in that have bridge loans, I'm not getting distributions right now, right? So I will look at the types of bank loans that they're utilizing for their investment.
Yeah, all the things you mentioned are really important, especially the debt. As I'm evaluating opportunities, similarly as a active passive investor, the debt is such a critical piece, and the complexity of the debt, pref equity versus mezzanine versus general equities. And I don't know if you have any resources that you like to share with investors. I do have like an ebook on my website, it has 110 questions passive investors should ask before they passively invest into syndications. I left missioncapital.com. Do you have any resources that has helped you in this journey that you like to share?
I mean, the big thing is probably like Bigger Pockets has always been a very good resource for me as far as passive investing. So I am currently working on a project that's developing basically programs for financial independence, talking about financial independence but through passive real estate investing. And so I do have some resources there that people can go on there and learn about financial independence, learn about our journey, and also to learn about how they can utilize passive investing to be able to reach financial independence. And that website, if they want to learn about real estate, they can go to passivereguide.theartoffi.com.
Got it. Nice. Hopefully our listeners caught that, and we'll also link in the show notes as well. Very nice. Cool. I think we're coming to the end of the podcast here. I love the fact that you share with us how you went from debt to financial independence and how you evaluate those opportunities in your passive investing, and letting people know it hands off doesn't have to be just mutual funds and stocks. Any other final takeaways or anything that you wish you would have done differently that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I would start today. I mean, don't hesitate. I think there's so much analysis paralysis out there and so much uncertainty. Definitely in this market right now, you got to be a little bit more careful in what you're looking for, but there are still deals to be had. There's still opportunities out there. As Warren Buffett has said, be fearful when everyone is greedy, be greedy when people are fearful, right? So there are opportunities out there, and I would not hesitate if I found the right opportunity to invest in it today. Start early, start now, because you won't regret it. And the earlier you can start, the quicker that you can actually reach financial independence and be able to be a passive, full-time, actively passive investor as well. So,
yeah, great story. Thank you so much for sharing, Aaron. What's the best way for our listeners to reach out to you if they're interested in learning a little more about you?
Yeah, I mean, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. You can just find me on there on LinkedIn. And so my partner and I, we have our real estate. If you want to hit up our website, it's gwcapitalinvest.com. The project I'm working on for financial independence, that is The Art of FI, so theartoffi.com. And that you will also see a lot of our stories of how we reach financial independence and helping others as well.
That's so inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you again so much for tuning into the American Dream Builder and Investor podcast with me, Missy Liu. We hope you enjoy the tips and tricks that others have used to build their American dream and their trinity of freedom. We would love for you to subscribe and leave a rating and a review. You can also find all the podcast episodes and details on lifemissioncapital.com. Until then, let your life mission go wild.